For more on this story, we can bring in Jim Shield, Professor of French Politics at the University of Warwick. Thank you very much for joining us here on France 24 today. How is it that in 2017, Emmanuel Macron came along and disrupted politics here in France? He took control of the presidency, his party, Les Républicains, took control of the National Assembly, and then years later, you failed to take control of any region in France.
Yes, the elections of 2017 that saw Macron and his new party elected to power changed France completely, as they said at the time, and consigned the traditional parties of right and left to history, the old world, as Macron put it then. That was the narrative then. These elections now show that out there in the country, nothing has changed. The Republicans and the Socialists went into these elections governing 7 and 5 of the 12 mainland regions. They emerge governing the same 7 and the same 5 regions, with Macron's and Le Pen's parties nowhere in sight. The traditional parties also emerge, it has to be said, governing more or less the same departments, with Macron's and Le Pen's parties not making any breakthrough in even one of those 95 departments. So I think these elections pose the question at the heart of the Macron presidency. Did it mark a radical new departure, or is it a parenthesis only in the business as usual of French politics?
Because given the performance of, the traditional parties like the centre-right party, for instance, or the socialists last night, are they going to be the force to reckon with looking ahead to 2022?
I think the question is one of momentum. Politics is about momentum. And who comes out of these elections with the momentum? The traditional centre-right, and in particular, 1 or 2, maybe 3 big barons who have used these regional elections as a potential springboard. Most obviously, Xavier Bertrand in the northern Hauts-de-France. He's been re-elected at the head of his region, and he's bent on challenging Macron all the way to the Élysée. Also, Valérie Pécresse in Île-de-France, Laurent Wauquiez in Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes. So it's the centre-right that comes out of this with the momentum.
We spoke to our correspondent in Marseille, and she was saying that Marine Le Pen, she sort of had to put a face that would resonate with more voters for the PACA region, the southern French region of Provence-Alpes-Côte d'Azur. But that came with a double-edged sword, because she ended up alienating party loyalists to the National Front. Do you think now that that test failed, she would go further to the right and not try to normalize her party?
Well, Le Pen's party has only ever governed a few town halls. She needed these elections to give her a bigger prize, a region, or even one of the much smaller departments, to bolster her party's governing credibility 10 months out from a presidential election. Not only does she come away with nothing, but her party scores are way down across the boards. This is the second electoral failure in a row after poor performance in last year's municipal elections. We need to stress, of course, that all of these have been local elections with local stakes, and Le Pen will go on having a big message when it comes to national issues such as crime and immigration. But she has a dilemma to address in the huge numbers of former voters who didn't turn out for her party here. And the dilemma is this: how far can she go in de-demonizing her party and bringing it closer to the mainstream without losing the anti-system appeal that was so key to its support in the past? That's the balancing act Le Pen has to get right. And these elections show that she hasn't got there yet.
Are we going to see a shift in stance from the French President Emmanuel Macron and his policies, given that up until now, in recent months, he's been acting like it's going to be a face-off between him and Marine Le Pen next year?
Yes, Macron has a lot of questions to answer, just like Le Pen. I mean, his young party was only formed in 2016. It didn't even exist at the last regional elections. But it's a dismal outcome that after 4 years in national power, the party still counts for so little out there in the regions and departments where it has simply failed to cultivate grassroots support. It remains ahead without a body, governing France from Paris, but with no meaningful existence beyond that. And even in those cases where Républicains En Marche candidates have been elected to council seats, they tend to be seasoned politicians who'd switched to Macron's party. So there's no new generation of elected officials being cultivated out there under Macron's banner. So as we approach the next presidential election, the two big front runners, Macron and Le Pen, have a lot of difficult questions to address, and they only have 10 months in which to do that.
Indeed. Jim Shield, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us on the program today.